Replacing first-round draft picks and award-winning players is going to be a very difficult task for many teams, and some will even see a slight change of pace and a slight change of record come this upcoming season. But can these teams replace their respective stars, and how will their teams fare going into the 2024 college football season? What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Lucas Hill here of SEC Unfiltered. Make sure you follow us on every social media platform over on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and of course, X. Also, subscribe down below. Click on the like button or the dislike button if you don't like us. And turn on bell notifications so that you are notified of every single time that we post a new video. Also, go on over to secunfiltered.com to check out our latest posts surrounding everything regarding the SEC, whether it be football, baseball, basketball, or, of course, anything in recruiting. Today's video is going to be brought to you by our good friends over at SeatGeek. Go on over to our friends over at SeatGeek.com. Use code SECU. Get yourself $20 off your first purchase. Just download either the SeatGeek app on your Android or Apple device. Join the 22 million plus that have downloaded SeatGeek so far as of 2022. And use code SECU to get $20 off of your first purchase. So the first big shoe that the SEC is going to have to fill out is Texas's defensive line, having to replace the interior of Devontae Sweat and Byron Murphy. The legacy that these two left behind in Austin is very difficult. It's hard to replace guys like that because you're talking about Byron Murphy, who decided to enter the draft early, and, of course, Sweat running out of eligibility. So now not only is Texas having to replace the irreplaceable, they got to do it without Bo Davis. They've got to do it without their star defensive line coach who basically led them to that sort of honor. Remember, Sweat was the Outland Trophy Award winner this past year. And I want to say that Murphy won the, either the butt kiss or the, what was it? It was either that or it was the Outland Trophy or the butt kiss trophy that he won. But regardless, these two are highly irreplaceable. It's hard to do it. But you got two guys that are capable of doing it. You got Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton, who are going to be the veterans at doing so. Though the Longhorns did have a chance to get former Houston defensive tackle transfer Jamari Caldwell. He ended up picking Oregon, but could also hit the portal again if he becomes available. Collins has plenty of ability. He was a former 5-star. He started 12 games over his Texas career. Broughton is a former top 200 player who has 2 career starts, and they should be better on the edge in 2024 because not only do you have Ethan Berg, you got Trey Moore, and you also have Colin Simmons, who's going to be a young star. But they would help much more tremendously if Collins takes that leap that he's hinted at in the past, because this guy has a lot of potential. And I think Al Collins is going to be the leader of that Texas interior. But we're going to have to see what happens come this season. The next one, can Nazir Stackhouse become the next great interior defensive lineman at Georgia? Another interior problem. So Georgia already last year had to replace a guy in Jalen Carter. Nazir Stackhouse did a pretty good job of doing so. But I'm ready to see him take that next step. He's a 2-time second-team All-SEC, but I think he could be even better this year. And Glenn Schumann's done a great job of helping this guy out and helping him become the player that he knows that he can be. This is another line of Georgia interior defensive linemen that are going to be even better with Jordan Davis, like Jalen Carter, like Geno Atkins, guys like that. Stackhouse has an opportunity to do much better than what those two have been so far. And heck, who knows? Philadelphia might be able to pick him out. But it's been the defensive line that has really helped Georgia take down opponents in years past and have made them a national championship contender. You need Michael Williams to become more consistent. You got to have Stackhouse really leading the charge. He's the guy that's been there his entire career. He'll be back for his final year this season, and he's going to have to take the role as that leader. And I can't wait to see him do that. I think he'll fill that role in very well. He's been under guys that have had to do that. He's been with Nakobe Dean. He's been with the Jalen Carters, the Jordan Davises. He's been under Malachi Starks, who I'm expecting to break out this season. And I can't wait to see what he's got to do because he is a big guy. And I do believe that if he is dominant as they have projected him to be, he's going to be even better this season than he has been the last 2 years. Coming up, it's South Carolina's receivers having to replace Juice Wells and Xavier Legette. Now, that's a difficult thing to do because you're talking about a first-round draft pick in last year in Legette, who I compared to DK Metcalf, and Juice Wells, who's now at Ole Miss, who is a dynamic receiver as well, who claimed he was still injured, but looked completely fine to come back onto the field. Regardless of that, you're losing two big-time players on the outside, and you got to replace them. So who do you have right now? You have Vandravius Jacobs, who's a redshirt freshman. He's from Florida State, has a big upside to him, excellent speed, and as well as a dynamic receiver. He has 4 seasons of eligibility remaining. We don't know what he's going to be like. He's the number 1 player in the ESPN's West Palm's top 63, number 41 receiver in all of recruiting back in 2023. He got a few reps in spring, did pretty well. But here's the guys that have the most experience, and we have Gage Larvadain, Dalvin Campbell, and Amari Higgins-Bruce. So these guys are really good. All right. Dalvin Campbell, let's start with him. Last year's All Mountain West honorable mention, led Nevada in receiving yards and catches. Had 5 games of at least 40 yards and 9 of at least 30. Led all of the Mountain West receivers with 19.2 receiving yards. This is a guy that's very fast, got great upside to him. He's a big target, 6'4", 205. This will be his last year of eligibility, and he could provide that spark that's needed for this South Carolina offense. Then you obviously have Gage Larvadain. I got to experience him firsthand for 2 years over at Southeastern, 2-time first-team All-Southland Conference in 21 and 22, and was also last year was one of the leaders in receptions and passing yard and receiving yards last year at Miami of Ohio. His best, I think he actually had a great game against UMass, 8 catches for 273 and 3 scores. This is a guy that you're probably going to put on special teams, but very smart player, very tough, plays bigger than his measurable. He's only 5'9" and 180 pounds. Trust me, this guy is a dog. He's got a mentality about him. He doesn't care. He's going to run through you, and he's going to try and bring one back to the house. So that's what you're getting on the outside. Amari Higgins-Bruce is another big guy. Played in all 13 games last year, 20 receptions, 312, 4 scores. Took advantage of his opportunities whenever he got on the field for this Louisville offense that was not great, but also not bad as well. So you're joining a big-time opportunity for this South Carolina offense to really take off with a young quarterback in LaNorris Sellers. But we'll just have to see. It's hard to replace those 2 guys, but hopefully the players I just mentioned will be able to fill those gaps. Having to replace Alabama's All-American secondary, that's very difficult to do. You lose Terrion Arnold, you lose Kool-Aid McKinstry, and you lose Caleb Downs, all of which 2 are in the NFL, 1 is at Ohio State. Who do you have next? Well, you got Domani Jackson, who is a transfer over from USC. He's got big upside to him. And you also have Jalen Mbakwe, who's the number 2 cornerback in the nation this past year, are next up. But make no mistake about it. How do you replace guys like that? Well, it's kind of hard in order and when you base on the line of cornerbacks that Alabama has put out in years past. Remember, you're talking about Minkah Fitzpatrick. You're talking about Eddie Jackson. You're talking about like I mentioned, Kool-Aid McKinstry. You're talking about Xavier McKinney. It's hard to follow up with guys like that. I think Domani Jackson is the biggest guy that I am really excited to see. How he's going to adjust from the Pac-12 to the SEC. It's going to be a bit of a shift for him, but he's a well-built corner. He's got an NFL body, 6'1" and 190 pounds, got long arms. He was the number 2 cornerback in the nation at one point in the class of, I want to say 21 or 22. He was compared to Xavier Rhodes of Buffalo. He had a first-round grade whenever he came out of high school. This is a good guy. Number 15 transfer in all of college football, the number 2 cornerback in the transfer portal, number 1 player in the state of California. So you're getting a guy. You're getting a big-time guy. You're getting a guy that's going to be very good. He's going to be a guy that you can plug in, and he's going to learn on the fly. He's going to be able to capitalize off of big opportunities for him. He's going to be able to do what's needed to be done in order to be an elite corner and to fill shoes like that, because has the potential and he has the upside to do it. And I think he's going to replace that role very well. Number 4, LSU's receivers having to replace Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors. Holy cow. How do you replace production like that whenever you had 2 1,000-yard receivers? Both are in first-round draft picks. Well, who do you have behind it? Well, everybody looks at Kyron Lacy. He was the 3rd option in this offense last year. And I talked on Texas Sports Unfiltered the other day and discussed this with Chris. And there's a big thing when it comes to Kyron Lacy, and that's been the talk so far around Baton Rouge and around the LSU area, is how do you replace those guys? Well, how is Kyron Lacy going to perform as the number 1 receiver? Well, it's nothing new for Lacy. Many people forget that Terrace Marshall was a guy that had to replace Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and did fairly well. Now, the biggest problem at that point was it was 2020. It was during the COVID year. It's hard to be able to replace guys like that after a season that was so controversial and so bad of having to play in the 2020 season where everybody was opting out, and eventually he opted out as well. So I'm not going to see Kyron Lacy opt out of the season. I think opting out was a stupid idea. And not only that, but you have other talent around you. You have a good quarterback and you have a good supporting cast. You got Chris Hilton, who's showing promise. You got CJ Daniels, who is the transfer from Liberty. He has a big upside to him. You got Greg Clayton, who not a whole lot of people talk about, but he played a good bit in the spring game and played well as well. So Kyron Lacy is going to be looked at as wide receiver 1, but make no mistake about it. The ball is going to be spread evenly around those guys, and as well when you include Mason Smith back in your offense. And at number 3, Kalen DeBoer having to replace Nick Saban. How do you do it? It's very hard to replace the GOAT of college football. It's very difficult to replace someone with the type of legacy that Nick Saban has because of what happened at the end of last year. And everybody thinks that, Alabama's going to take a step back this year. I personally don't believe that's going to happen. I do think Alabama's going to shock a lot of people and contend for a national title like they've always done. This is going to be nothing new than what happened in the Nick Saban era. Sure, you lost a lot of guys to the draft and the transfer portal, but you still got talent that you got coming back to Tuscaloosa. It's going to be difficult replacing a guy like Nick Saban, who will still be in the building as a consultant of sorts to DeBoer, but DeBoer has a winning record on him. He's won a Division II national championship. He's won several awards as a coach. He's been to a college football playoff national title. So he knows how to take over for guys like that. And having to replace legends, it's not the first time he's done that. He had to replace Jeff Tedford for 2 years. Now, I don't know if I would consider Tedford a legend of sorts, but he's still an amazing coach. Not the legacy of Saban, but he will be. This is where Saban is. This is kind of where Tedford is right here. And there's another list in the middle of elite tier. This is Saban, elite, and this is great. He was in a great tier. How do you replace a guy like Jeff Tedford? Well, he did fairly well. You know, it's not like they did terrible. They went 9-3 and went to the New Mexico Bowl in 2021. And then ends up getting the job over at Washington. And in Washington's case, he didn't have to replace a legend, but that locker room was very, very toxic whenever Jimmy Lake got fired. And he brings in Ryan Grubb, he brings in William Inge and Chuck Morrell. And guess what? They win 11 games that year. And the very next year, they go to the college football playoff and fall short against the Michigan Wolverines. So DeBoer has a long history of winning. But the thing is, it's hard to replace a legend like Nick Saban. We'll just have to see how he does in year one. Number 2, Oscar Delp and Ben Urasek having to replace Brock Bowers. That is tough. You're replacing arguably one of the best players in Georgia football. He's probably top 5 of all time. He's not going to replace Herschel Walker at the top, but that is a tough thing to do. But Oscar Delp has the ability to do that. He's been in this Georgia offense around the same time as Brock Bowers has. And he's learned with Brock. He's learned how to become an efficient blocker. He's learned how to become an efficient pass catcher. You're not going to see him line up in the slot like where you saw some of what Brock did, but he's still an efficient back. He played H-back most of the time in certain packages and climbed up to that second level to take out some pulling backers and some other safeties that may be trying to come across on run support. Excellent on that. And you also have Ben Urasek, who's the transfer from Stanford, who has an opportunity to break out. He's shown flashes of greatness. It's only whenever he gets his number called that he has the opportunity to do that. And then number 1, Garrett Nussmeier having to replace Jaden Daniels. You replace the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. That is difficult. It's hard to replace a guy that has that type of legacy that Daniels has, as arguably the second greatest quarterback in LSU history behind Joe Burrow. And how do you do something like that? Well, you surround him with talent, and that's what Nussmeier has. It's a lot different than what Miles Brennan or Max Johnson or TJ Finley had to do in 2020 with having to replace a guy like Joe Burrow. They're two completely different scenarios because LSU doesn't lose 17 players in the NFL draft. They return a lot of big-time starters, and they return their 2 tackles, both of which will be first-round draft picks in 2025 in Will Campbell and Emory Jones. That may be on next year's biggest shoes to fill for SEC Unfiltered. So Nussmeier is going to have to come in and play hero. But at the same time, maybe he doesn't. You never know what's going to happen because he doesn't have to scramble. He's a pro-style pocket passing quarterback. Joe Sloan is in a perfect situation with a quarterback like Nussmeier. Nussmeier's been waiting patiently for the last 2 years to take over the reins. He's learned from Miles Brennan. He's learned from Jaden Daniels. He's learned from all those guys. And he's ready to take the next step. I think he has an opportunity to do that. That's my list. What do you guys think? Who are the biggest shoes to fill in the SEC? Did I miss anybody? Leave it down in the comments down below. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube. Click on the bell notification so that you are notified for every new video that we release here on SEC Unfiltered. And until next time.